Analyzing suffering in Sylvia Plath's selected poems. Analyzing suffering in Sylvia Plath's selected poems. In the history of English literature, almost every known author and poet has put an effort to write the events that changed their lives in their works. Sylvia Plath, one of the widely praised poets, also suffered immense difficulties in her own life, and her work has mainly influenced by her depression, the suffering that affected her. Plath's poetry is full of deep doubts, fear, which she reveals with honesty. By a glance, her poems were considered to be truly unique. A deep look at her childhood and personal experiences removes some sort of mystery from her writing. Instead to find comfort in others, she made herself isolated with her writing as her only expressive outlet. At an age of 8, she published a poem which was remarkable. Her own fantasy playground seemed hell for her. Her poetry arouses a sense of sadness, regret, which mainly reflects her struggles with despair, mental illness. Her efforts have also established her as a representative voice of feminist concern. Her ambitions of finding happiness through work, marriage, family were prevented from her to accomplish her own wishes. Sylvia Plath was born on October 27, 1932, died in February 11, 1963. Was an American poet whose best-known works such as poems Daddy, Lady Lazarus and novel Belger starkly express a sense of alienation and self-destruction, closely tied to her personal experiences and by extension the situation of women in the mid-20th century America. Plath published her first poem at age 8. She entered and won many literary contests, and while still she is in high school, she sold her first poem to the Christian Science Monitor and her first short story to 17 magazine. She entered Smith College on a scholarship in 1955, was a co-winner of the magazine fiction contest in 1952. At Smith, Plath achieved considerable artistic, academic, and social success, but she also suffered from severe depression, attempted suicide, and underwent a period of psychiatric hospitalization. She graduated from Smith with the highest honors in 1955 and went to Newman College in Cambridge. She married the English poet George Hicks. Ariel, a collection of Plath's later poems that included Daddy and other of her well-known poems, Lady Lazarus, sparked the growth of a much broader following of devoted and enthusiastic readers than she had during her lifetime. Ariel received a review in the New York Times that praised its relentless honesty, sophistication of her use of rhyme, metaphors, and Poetry magazine noted a pervasive impatience and a positive urgency to the poems. Plath quickly became one of the most popular American poets. The appearance of small collection of previously unpublished poems, including Crossing the Water, The Winter Trees, was welcomed by critics and public alike. Sylvia Plath was a gifted writer of poetry who ended her life all too young. Many of the truths behind her final years were exposed after her death, discovered in letters revealing the dark secrets of her tragic relationship with death. The couple married on June 16, and the following year, Plath and Hughes moved to the Smith College where she taught the students. It was a challenge for her to find the time and energy to write when she was teaching. Also, they both became deeply interested in astrology and supernatural. In February 1961, Plath's second pregnancy ended in miscarriage. In June, Plath had a car accident which she described as one of many suicide attempts. In July 1962, Plath discovered Hughes had been having an affair with Wewell, and in September the couple separated. Career. In 1958, Plath took a job in psychiatric unit of General Hospital, and in evening she took creative writing seminars. In 1960, Plath published her first collection of poetry, and in August she finished The Bell Jar. In 1962, Plath wrote most of her poems for the collection of Ariel, which her reputation now sits upon. Her depression returned, but she completed the rest of her poetry collection, which would be published after her death in 1965. The Bell Jar came out in January 1963, published under the pen name Victoria Lucas. Sylvia Plath's style of writing has unique uses of rhythm and meter, themes of feminist criticism, the sonatic and visual irregularities. Plath would speak these poems in her own voice as she wrote them. Very painful and intense subjects such as suicide, self-loathing, Nazis, shock treatment, dysfunctional relationships, and homicidal iron tasks. The use of parody and black humor rescues her poetry from total pathos. He's also one among the confessional poets, where these confessional poets use I. It often deals with a subject not often written about the publicly, death, trauma, depression. It is a genre of poetry first identified in the decades immediately followed by the Second World War. Other poets whose work typifies this style include obviously Sylvia Plath, next one is Theodore, and the other well-known poet is Annie Sexton. He's also one among the confessional. Death. First suicide attempt was at the age of 20. Her second suicide attempt was right before she found out that Hughes was having an affair. Her third one was successful suicide attempt by poisoning, dyeing her head in the oven. The poems deal with the heavy subjects like suicide, dissatisfaction, and unhappiness in Daddy, comprised of 65-line stanza, is a brutal and venomous poem commonly understood to be about Plath's deceased father, Otto Plath. The speaker begins by saying that he does not do anymore, and that she feels like she had been afoot living in a black stone for 30 years. Too timid to either breathe or sneeze, she insists that she needed to kill him. She refers to him as Daddy, but that he died before she had time. She describes him as heavy, like a bag full of God, resembling a statue with one big grey toe, and its head submerged in the Atlantic Ocean. She remembers her. She at one time prayed for his return from death, and she gives a German utterance of grief, which translates literally to "O you." She knows he comes from a Polish town that was overrun by wars, and wars. But one of the Polack friends had told her that there are several towns of that name. Therefore, she cannot uncover his hometown where he put his foot and root. Also, Sylvia Plath's Daddy is not just a Plath's relationship with her father, it is also about the topics such as death, love, fascism, brutality, war, marriage, femininity, and God. Daddy is perhaps Sylvia Plath's best known poem. It has been reviewed and criticized by hundreds and hundreds of scholars and is upheld by one of the best examples of confessional poetry. Tulips by Sylvia Plath is a personal and confessional poem. It explores the poet's innermost emotions and mental state. Plath wrote this poem after going through an appendectomy in hospital, and the poem was originally named as Sick Room Tulips in Hospital, but she later shortened it. Within this piece, she taps into the themes that are common in her work: death and pureness of death, confinement and illness or sickness. The speaker, who is most certainly Sylvia Plath, goes back and forth between a tone of peace and concern. She comments on the best moments of her time in the hospital and how they were ruined by the arrival of tulips. Now she is more frantic and much more bothered than she wanted to be. The poet is reminded of life, her own heart, and the fact that she hasn't quite escaped either yet. It is written in 9 stanzas and 63 lines. Turquoise has started the poem was written about the bouquet of tulips Plath received as she recovered from the appendectomy in the hospital. This poem is also included in the collection of Ariel published in 1965. Mad Girl's Love Song by Sylvia Plath. It explores the truth of relationship. The speaker wonders how deep and meaningful it really was. This is a fairly short poem with many layers in it. It typically a Plath fashion. Mad Girl's Love Song is packed with poetic devices. It also presents a theme that is common in Plath's poetry: unrequited or failed love. This is one of the Plath's earlier poems. She also wrote Mad Girl's Love Song when she was just 20 years old and a student at Smith College, and all-women's college located in Northampton. Plath's poem reveals an utmost obsessive view of love, and it seems that the speaker of this is perplexed and mystified about what happened with her former lover, who has seemingly lost interest in her. Lady Lazarus is one of the best poems of Sylvia Plath and an ideal example of Plath's diction. This poem contains Plath's poetic expression of her suicidal thoughts. Lady Lazarus is about Sylvia Plath's failure in her previous suicidal attempts and her mental transformation before the third attempt. Plath is also known for her tortured soul. This is what makes this poem intriguing to readers. Most people have experienced agony in at least once. This agony is often so deep that no words can express the true anguish present. Plath, however, inserts delicate, beautiful words into dark, lonely feelings. Through this, the expression of pain in Plath's poetry is presented through symbols and wit. She embraced her suffering and used it as an inspiration for sharing with the rest of the world through her works. Sylvia Plath desperately wanted to make her poems relevant to people. She succeeded uniquely. Her poems are read and appreciated by many worldwide. Her work is not mere free verse confessional. Many of her better poems are technically depth, complex, and beautifully dark. Death is a prevalent theme in Plath's poetry. She manifests it in several ways. In Daddy, she claims that she wants to kill her father herself because of the strong hold he has over her mind and work. She has explored the sense of victimhood and suffering in Daddy. When Peter O. asked Plath about the themes that particularly attract her as a poet, she said, "I have been very excited by what I feel is the new breakthrough that came with." Also, I feel that I have been exploring certain American poetry, think particularly that poetess Anne Sexton, who writes about her experience as a mother who had even nervous breakdown, is extremely emotional and feeling young woman, and her poems are wonderfully craftsman-like poem, and yet they have a kind of emotional and psychological depth, which I think is something perhaps quite now. My objective is to analyze and compare the theme of suffering in the selected poems Tulips, Daddy, Lady Lazarus, and Mad Girl's Love Song, written by Sylvia Plath. Her obsession with the death and pain led her to write these poems. It is evident that she suffered through depression, causes chaos in her marriage, destroyed her family, affected her mental being, and ruined her life. Sylvia is making a bold statement in these poems that in committing suicide, she would be able to escape the reality of never being able to find true happiness in living. Thank you.